let's get to today's lesson. Scaling in and out of a trade, certainly huge. Like I said, got a lot of questions about it, and one I finally want to get recorded, and let's get into it. So, a quick little synopsis and a brief overview. It's important to note that there is no perfect recipe that is going to fit everybody. I promise you that. Just like when it comes to stock trading, right, team? You're most likely not going to find, the same. Everyone's not going to be trading the same. Me and Deck are pretty similar. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's pretty close to the same. But it's not exactly the same. So everyone's going to be doing a little bit of different. Broker, your chat room you're in, the way you trade, you short, you scalp, you go long, whatever. You buy downtrend breaks, you buy whatever you're doing. Everyone's going to do something a little bit different, right? The main thing is to focus on sticking to your plan. Now, with that said, here is my advice along with my current habits that I've learned from others, about scaling in and out of a trade. Scaling in quickly once conditions meet the trading plan criteria. Now, there's no rule about how many chunks you want to get in. Some traders want, have many, but I personally go full size all at once right then and there. Hardly am ever like Deck, he'll have, because I usually only have so many trades. When I get to that point, I'll have those entries in and go, 1070, some at 1050, another little set at 1035, and then, fill me up nice and huge there. I just kind of go all into my, stick straight to my ears, which you saw earlier, on some of my alerts. I want to go straight to those bounce plays and watch it bounce there, or I want it to short that area and just stick to it and go all in. But some want to do scale in, and that's fine. But the thing is, again, there's no specific, set rule for anyone. It's whatever you want to do. Scaling out all at once for losing trades if you want to go for it. Now, in fact, if you decided to stop out, why would you keep part of the open position, the position open? The trade did not go as planned, right? It's time to get out. The sooner you figure this out, the better it will be sticking to your plan, sticking to that stop loss. Now, scaling out, to me, like I said, I do all at once. I'm like, I'll get out a little here. Some of those traders come to me, man, I'm in it like, CPSH or what? I guess that's up a little. I gave it CPSH. I'm in at CPSH at 1180. It's at 1060 now. What do you think I should do? Why didn't you say, what was your stop loss? I mean, now it's, sometimes that's one of the first things I want to say. I'm like, well, what was your stop loss? And then, next time just stick to that. Do you think it's going to come back up? I mean, it can. I mean, any stock can continue to rise, but, you get my point. So just stick to those plans. So I'm always usually, besides scaling up, when I'm paying myself either on the way up or the way down, I'm usually an all-in type trader. I'm all in on my buy, and sometimes, or I should say, all out on a stop loss. So I'm all in when I'm buying something, right? So I want to buy something like, say, on that bounce earlier with CPSH. I wanted the bounce. So I wanted, like, to say the 11 or the 1065-ish area bounce. So boom, I'm all in at 1065. Now, say if that didn't work, and I'll get into it, boom, I'm all out at once if that goes below. I'm all in buy, and I'm all out stop loss usually type trader. I don't scale out. The only time I'm scaling out is when I'm paying myself. Now, scaling, which I'm going to get into. Scaling out into chunks only for winning trades is a great habit and works well for me. After all, the trade is going exactly as you were expecting. Why would you cash in the whole position at once? So I know a lot of people are like, well, even if it's only up a few cents, stick to your plan. Stick to your stop loss. Don't go, it's only, I got P. No, pay yourself on the way up. And like I said, a lot of the time, remember like you saw me last week when I traded, limit some of that damage that can be done and just scale out some of your plays. So you're only in so much anymore. So even if it does go south on you or the wrong way, you aren't in as big as you first were. A good approach would be to get a portion of the profit of a trade at your first target and get the rest out with the technical exit signal arises, which I will get into, right, team? Exactly what I stick to. Stick to your targets. Find your resistance areas. Scale out into those areas. You always want to hold a part of your trade for a bigger move because there's nothing more satisfying than enjoying what? Enjoying that driver's seat. So limiting the averaging down practice because this can quickly turn into bigger losses than what you're willing to manage. Accept the loss once the trade hasn't gone the planned way. And that's one of the greatest skills of any successful trader is what? Cut losses quickly. And that same thing is going averaging up. Unless this is something you've done in practice over and over and over again with success, I wouldn't advise doing it. Right, team? And of course, the risk versus reward. Always, like me, stick to that kind of 2-to-1, 1-to-2 ratio, whatever you want to call it. But say if you're buying in at that, like I said earlier, 1060 mark, you want your stop loss. If your stop loss is 20 cents, so 1040, usually your target should be around that which it should have been, which would have been perfect, that $11 area. So a 40 cent target with a 20 cent area stop loss. All right, let's dive into some of these examples now. And I just kind of heard me blab enough about kind of the technical analysis and me kind of almost sounding like I'm reading out of a book. Just stuff I wrote down, trying to make it sound, nice and pretty for you guys. And now here's just all from earlier this year. I've kind of put some newer ones on here, but all the way back in April of last year. And again, with this, I remember me and Deck loved this play. It was a 375 bounce play. So boom, you're in at 375. It was back from the daily chart. We were looking back on the daily. It was a beautiful bounce off of 375, and what? Totally fine if you're scaling out. I forgot to put one in, even at 4, right? Scale out some at this upper shadow. It immediately jumps back up right into this little upper shadow area, which is going to be resistance area from right here at 425. A lot of you may have been out all at 4, which is fine. That's a great trade, 25 cents. But try to start saving, even if it's just, I'm telling you, 50 shares, 100 shares for that extended move up once you do get one of these beautiful bounce plays, and it is immediate push on up. And understand then too, on the opposite end was what I was trying to get into, was what I meant to say kind of before that. Make sure you're almost out all of your shares into this trade. Don't continue, I'm holding in. If you're in, like, maybe you get in 5 to 10,000 shares here, that's one thing. You can, hold probably close to 2,000 shares because this is really pushed and hasn't gotten close. If you stick to your plan, hasn't gotten close to your stop loss. I'm sure if you moved your stop loss up and moved it up, it probably never really maybe hit it until maybe here on the VWAP, maybe. Maybe you get my point. This really, because this just continues and continues and continues, which we'll get into other plays that are just a little bit different. But again, maybe you missed this play right here on these dip buys off of old upper shadow, upper resistance right here in this area, this little shelf. I could have put a line in. Look at these pullbacks look at that. I should say that pullback for a dip buy. Beautiful wedge. Right here, maybe on the break of the wedge, and I forgot to put an arrow here, but right here on the break of the wedge, right here, you could have got in. You're scaling out immediately into these upper shadows of what? I could have put a line right across right here of this resistance areas, and that's why some people you'll see like, Jeff Aceto, Papacito, the Short King, or POV Joshua's charts, or other people's charts that have lines, it's line city limits. They'll have 10 lines in on a chart, lines going up, the trend lines in, resistance and support lines in, all through. Just all over the place, there's lines to let them know where they're buying in, where they're scaling out at. Again, could have put a line all the way across this dotted line, all the way over to what? A first bounce area right here, but then what, a double whammy right on these old support areas, lower shadows, off the upper shadows too, right? And the VWAP. Beautiful. And then again, right in these old areas, once it starts moving on up, scaling out. Oh, we get a push. You're scaling out. So know and understand these areas of where, and I'll kind of just leave these to you, or, kind of look at them yourself, of where to buy in and where to sell. Some of the times, they may not make much sense, but sometimes when you look at them long enough, they make beautiful sense. Right here, beautiful VWAP pullback. We get an extended push, finally testing the high of day area. Right here, quick little pullback to the VWAP, which we saw holding earlier. So we know it's going to hold at least once again, kind of like it did earlier, right? And then it finally pushes. Break of this old high, the high of day area right here. Look, I could have put a line straight across there and it broke beautifully. Look at the spike from the high of day break from around whatever this area was, which the price was there. I cut that off, but a beautiful break. And again, remember I showed you this one. This is from the other day. You could how many lessons you could get from CERX, where I finally bought this play. Right here on these dips. That was actually the arrow right here where I bought in at. And I forgot to, like I said, I didn't want to overcrowd some of these with arrow cities and lines, and people are just like, I can't understand what you're looking at, AK. But essentially, obviously, a lot of these green ones are where you would buy in at, the dips, the VWAPs, the break of the high a day, a dip right here to old upper shadow, nice little quick red candle pullback, and then you're out. Right here, you're in, and then right there, that's why that red shadow, a red arrow, I should say, not shadow, but arrow is there, because you're out. You're a quick 20 cent, 15, 20 cent pop for a scalp. That's all this. It's hard to get on plays that run. This one, as you can tell, it's like a 15, 20, 30 center mover at a time. It's not one you're like, it's ripping dollars, right? You're not like, I'm in for this. 15, okay, 18.75. Okay, breaks through 20. Not one of those moves. This is, this is a move from $1 close to $2. That's it. It looks like it's much more, but that's it. So take your moves when you get them. And same here, like later on where you get that double whammy, like I showed you this the other day. Could have put a line in right through here. So old resistance equals new support, kind of the sandwich, remember? Lower bun, upper bun, VWAP, double whammy bounce. Beautiful. And then you're out in these upper shadows. Even if you want to get a scale out here, scale out some. Get some off your plate, certainly so. So, okay, I'm up some. I'm green. I got some green in my plate. That way, and then your stop loss probably should still be right below the VWAP, right? So that way you're still golden. You never got close to your stop loss. And then, okay, I'm scaling out here. I'm scaling out some more. Maybe completely done. Okay, it starts dropping off. Okay, you had to, you do maybe snake skin Randy in it for the last little bit of shares, and then okay, here's my stop loss VWAP. I'm out. I want to make sure it's still above my entry or close to my entry. I'm out. And that's okay if it continues to run, and then again, hey, what could you do? Looks like it's about to hold, looking over at your level 2, seeing a bunch of people, over on, helping you out with the support area. Boom. Okay, let me add back in maybe even. And then you can buy right back in. And you look at the areas where you scale out. Here's one more that I've kind of found online, then adjusted myself to make it look, and so it's not just a graph and it's a little bit more technical looking, so you can see the areas of what I'm talking about. Maybe you get in on a bounce play, for a wedge break at $2, you're in right here at 2. And you want to buy this little wedge break. So where the entry would be is anywhere on the $2 bounce or a break of this little wedge right here at 205. And of course, you're scaling out in resistance areas on your way up. I mean, these are just more this same, essentially the same thing over and over with areas of where you're going to want to scale in, scale out. That one actually got messed up, as you can see. Those arrows, I messed up with that one. Those arrows got all twisted around. Oh, here's a great one. The 117 area for a bounce, right? Okay, it could easily continue to crack, but why I wanted it, look at the lower shadows right here, kind of bouncing at 120. There's one that could come down a little bit lower here, and that's why I say sometimes I'll say area behind the alert, which I'm sure there in this alert was probably the 120 area, because you can see it's bouncing more at 120, but could pull back to what? This little area right here with lower shadows, and it did a little bit even further to 115. I was filled at 117, and so I kind of put the little crosshairs there to see where I was filled and also what I was looking at for support. And then I was out a lot into the VWAP, right here into the moving average as well. Of course, that was back when I would still use a little bit during the day and see which ones helped me most, whether it was a 50-day, 200-day moving average on the intraday, or sometimes, and of course, a 13.9 EMA on the intraday. A lot of people use that as well, or the 20. And I was using all of them here and there to see how much they would help, or how much it was working. And this, like at this time, for whatever reason, I noticed how the 50 would be running with the VWAP with a lot of these plays. So to me, a double whammy, and that's where I started to come up with that double whammy support. But right here, I was out a lot of my trade. I should say have like a lot. That's where I should say a lot of what I've gotten to is my first scale out zone is getting out half of my shares. Now, eventually I'm going to move to, when I get a little bit bigger sizes, I want to maybe just do a quarter. So I can, hey, I want these to run a little more. And then because if always I can, seeing it's weak there, I could go boom, boom, and I'm out half. I could sell a quarter, then sell another quarter, and I'm out half. I see it's really weak and it falls over on me, just to kind of get out what I usually, and that's why I like getting out half, because it gets rid of a lot of what I'm not worried as much anymore. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm profited some here. I'm already up, 10 cents on half my share load. Let me get half of it off. That way I'm already up green. Don't have to worry about if it collapses over. I'm not nearly in as big as I was before. All those kind of things. All right, sorry, I was just making sure everything's good to go on. I don't know why YouTube. What happened there on YouTube? All right, that was weird there. Everyone's still, give me a thumbs up. Everyone's still good to go on YouTube, right? I'm kind of watching on my end, but everyone's still going on YouTube, right? Give me a thumbs up. But just real quick, but yes, and I just want to get to some of the, and I'll get to some of these questions afterwards. But you get my point. So a lot of what I get into is right here, if I can get my mouse back over, is once we get into this VWAP area, awesome, cool. Once we get into this VWAP area, and this 50, and then of course at the time it was a 50-day intraday moving average, but that's where I was out a lot of my shares. Now into this upper shadow right here, where I could have put a line in, and I forgot to, but right here, see where it bounced and where it bounced at this 135 area, and then you can come over right here at the upper shadow. Where did it hit? 135, right on the dot. So that's my point. That's where I would get out. I want people to see what I'm trying to get into, why I'm scaling out, where I'm scaling out. It's not just, oh, I'm scaling out here. Well, I'm literally just looking back technically. Sometimes it's technical, sometimes it's just looking at support and resistance, but just looking at these areas and just keeping it simple to myself. Thanks for the thumbs up. Awesome. Appreciate it, team. And there we go. Triple D. Well, I said break a 30. Here we go. Watch out for Triple D. Just kind of leaving that in there, but just so you can see. And now, of course, that's where I was at most of my shares. Now, when it came down, my stop loss was my entry. I did get out a little bit more of my shares, and I think it was only like, because I got in big here. I wanted, love this play. I think I got in like 5,000 shares, maybe a little more. And I remember running on me a little bit more, or I should say it ran a little bit more, and I got some profit into this area. I don't think I was all the way up to 150. I remember staying in for some of this break, and I was out, but before it even hit 150, because I thought I was going to hit 150 and fell hard. And I think this one just continued to run. If I'm certain, we can go back. 5/19 of 2020. Look what the NNDM did, but I think it went higher than 150 that day. I think it went pretty high. But again, that's why I want people to see where I'm getting in a lot of these trades, right? Oh, here we go. Here's one of my most recent ones. Remember adding this one recently. Small account challenge trade, which isn't much, right? I wanted to pull back so everyone can see. I wanted to pull back from this high of day run. It finally pushed. I didn't get the VWAP bounce like I truly wanted right there, you know. So I was hoping for a pullback where? To either the VWAP if I could get it, or what? The 425-ish area, 420 area right here. And so I find we get this pull. Remember, debt got on this trade too, and it pulled all the way back and it got super close. And so I just market ordered in. I'm like, oh, this is close as I'm getting to the VWAP. And I also feel like it wasn't the greatest of feels. It was like around 415-ish. And then it spiked right back up here around 435. And again, noticing how weak it was looking, it wasn't really spiking. Look at the volume also as well down here, team. It's not really that strong, and it's not that strong even overall. Because I remember this back in October when things were a little bit slower. That's why we couldn't get the sack roll in the small account challenge. Couldn't really get that popping and rocking. Why? Because it was just a little slower. The volume is the main reason why. You know, more volume here most likely could have at least bounced a little higher because more buying, more volume equals what? More buying, more selling, but most likely a little bit more buying right here, a little more volume that would have popped it up, probably at least back up to 450-ish area, right around this little upper plateau, maybe a little higher. But it didn't happen. Me and Deck both, I remember freaking both saw it at the same time. We both got out about the same area. Like, oh, okay, this is looking weak. And exactly what we got. Got out most of our shares there. And I remember it finally started to crack around 420, right as it hit this 420 area, because I wanted to stay mostly green because I thought this was about to happen. And it did. And I could have went long again for another quick scout, but I didn't. But got out right there around 420. Wasn't the biggest of trades. It was like a $100 trade. Wasn't much at all because I was in at 415. I got out like half of my share load size around 435, 430-ish, and then got out the rest at 420. So that's what I'm saying. You've got to notice what the stock's also doing. Now, that's going to take time. Everyone's going to have a little bit of, you know, and I get that a lot, you know, recently of how to, you know, and that all comes to you. That it's hard to do a lesson of, well, how do you know if a stock's going to fall over and how to, you know, I can try to show you as much as I can, but a lot of that comes down to your feel, your touch, watching stocks over, you know, over the years. Like here, it's weaker. It was back in October. So that's, you know, that's ingredient 1. Ingredient 2. So leading to that would be what? Less volume. So less buying. That's going to be happening. Just overall less volume. And 3, you know, who knows what the news was, what the float was, that could have had something to do with it. But just watching it and then in the overall, adding those 3 things together, knowing, okay, this isn't that strong. It had its move. This is, at that time, was kind of a decent move, seeing a stock go from, you know, 280 bounce play back up to, you know, 493. Take your profit. If it does somehow, you know, rebound through this area and push, which it could have here. So you could have easily U-shaped right there and continue to push and, you know, woo, right there. Could have easily U-shaped. I just saw it in that time frame in a hotter year or hotter month, right? 2, 3, 4 months before this. This was back in like April. Yeah, it's probably going to happen. You know, it probably will easily have happened. October, it just wasn't that hot then. So you got to understand what the market you're in, the conditions you're in. So take your profit and scale out, stick to your plan. Another quick little example, SLS. This was almost a year ago now. This is when we just started to rock and roll. I love this trade. This is one of the really started, you know, helping me out last year and kind of really boosting my confidence. There were a couple plays early on, but this was one of them. And again, kind of like earlier with that play I just showed you with pre-market support, I wanted the same thing here. I wanted that 240 bounce, and it was beautiful. Beautiful. I remember alerting in chat. I didn't want to pull that actual over here, but I have I don't think I pulled that one in. Nope. But I have one of the, of course, because I did this. I did a lesson on SLS, and I pulled over my chat or my alerts from chat that day. Like I, you know, doing my alerts. I want to show you guys I'm credible, that I'm alerting these things before they happen. And I remember alerting in pre-market. It was right around here. 20s, I forgot what time it was, but it was falling back. And I was like, watch for a 240 bounce play. Of course, it has resistance right here at the 275 area, and then above that around the 290 area. And so, boom, first candle almost went down like, oh, come on. And then whammy, right, you know, because it opened right here, as you can see, came down here, came back up, and then opened and came right back down here, and then gave me a quick little, right on the number, 240 on the dot. And then, as you can see, here's the low. See, there's the L. That's the low on this candle because I have it highlighted with the crosshairs there. So right on the dot, press the trigger because sometimes I just market order and I didn't have a limit order set. Sometimes I love feeling a little bit more. And I do get good fills on Thinkorswim. I'm sorry for those that don't, but I'm just looking at my level 2, and when they're a penny off, like a lot of, you know, trades we look at are maybe 2 off, I get filled right there where I want. I got filled at, like, I think it was like 242 or 3, whatever it was, because it was right after it hit 240. Whoop, right on its way back up. And then where I'm out, I was out half of my shares at the VWAP. So I was out 1,500 shares of my $3,000 or 3,000K complete load that I had. I was out 1,500 shares of my half of my share size, right? So now I'm down to half my share size. waiting for this to kind of, I'm like, come on, probably at that time too, thinking in my head, okay, I'm going to move my stop loss up to my entry area. If this starts cracking back and it fails at the VWAP, right, team, and it gets back to 240, I'm done. Like, that's fine. I don't want to, don't want to risk my 220, 225, what am I trying to say? Stop loss, which it was somewhere around that 220 area, 225. Because my end goal is what? My first little area to scale out in, because I knew it was going to show some resistance, is the VWAP. But right here's my goal. This 275, 280 area. So I can, and I'm still sticking to that 2-to-1, 1-to-2 ratio where I want 40 cents for my 240 entry, 280 essentially, and 220 to 225-ish was my original stop loss. And then I get exactly that. Out 1,000 more shares there. It was either in this upper shadow or this upper shadow. One of the candle, essentially, when I saw it hitting that area, this plateau, lower shadows over here, the lower of these candles, the up of these candles, kind of before I was forming that sandwich area, but it's kind of the opposite sandwich where the upper bun, the top bun is over here and the lower bun's on this side for once. So resistance. So I scaled out more there. So I was only in 500 shares. And then finally, look at the volume come in, the surge. There's the volume. This is when I still the MACD. Here's the volume candle, the biggest volume candle of the day right here. Look at this huge blue candle. Ooh, whammy. And then finally, my last 500 shares, remember scaling out right over $3. I'm like, yes. And of course, it runs up to like $3.50 and more, somewhere in that area. But yeah, so just learning to scale out into your resistance areas as they come up. So you're in at 240, your perfect support area you want bounce play. And then you're out where, team? Into resistance VWAP, into resistance 275, 280, into resistance if you wanted to, maybe 290, and then let it fly through 3, baby. And then when here, a little quick example, when I get out all at once, so no support below and it hits the stop loss, right? Right here. So if this would have done this immediately, I got in at 240 and it kind of tried to shoot up and it didn't, it maybe went up to like say 245-ish or something like that, and then boom, right back down, and then boom, down again. I'm not waiting for this, to be like, well, maybe it'll bounce. No, I'm not waiting for it to bounce off 220 or 225. As soon as it hits those areas, and it does not bounce, that's why you kind of have those areas set in, because it's usually the next support area below you, because if it cracks that, you done. So that's why you have those in. And so when it cracks those, I'm done. I'm out. Right at 220, 225, it starts falling through that area, and it's not really holding. I'm out. I'm done. And say maybe if I did want to sell at once, like one of those, some of those traders out there that you do, and I understand sometimes when you do get all out at once, totally understand it. So you got in at 240 and it comes up to the VWAP and it's trying to break it, and I'm going to hold it for, you're in 1,000 shares, or even you're in 3,000 shares, which even if you're in 3,000 shares, totally understand it here. And it's a good time to do it. You see it hitting resistance, hitting resistance. At that point, I'm probably already scaling out. I mean, like 1,000 shares, I'm already like, okay, I'm going to lower my, that's just me being an experienced trader and seeing this. But as maybe you want to just go get all at once. Here's my point. I understand why it's showing. None of this happens. Say none of this happens. I meant to black this out, so none of this happens. But this happens. Hits an upper shadow. Oh, no, come on, break. Oh, it's going to break upper shadow. You better be out in this upper shadow candle, because here's what can happen. We've seen it a lot. It finally fails, and everyone in their mother sells, and they beat you to it, and it, boom, and cracks your entry essentially before you can blink, and it's back down here to 220. So I can totally understand right there getting all out and anywhere into these upper shadows. And again, when I get into it, kind of like deck, and when I might average down, it's when a play like this, and like kind of like I was showing you below, or above, I should say, the same type thing. When this comes down to maybe the next support area. So this cracks the 115. I'm in at 115, 117. And I'm like, okay, well, the next support area is, and of course, I should have made this green, but and put more candles in. But right here, maybe there was a line coming in. Maybe it was the VWAP. Maybe it was an old resistance support area from pre-market, another great little area. Or maybe it is just $1. But that, $1 itself, I should say, well, not dollars, it's just one. But $1, that's where I could maybe see in yourself, average in, those bounce areas below. That would be your stop loss, essentially. Hey, I'm going to add, there's no way it's going to crack this here. You have to be super confident. One of those things you do a lot, find yourself successful doing it as well. That's when I, would advise, essentially scaling in. And now let me get into this. I know it's going to be part of, because I want this part of the lesson and I didn't have a short lesson, but same with now a short part. So let me get to the short end of these things. So like say for a short, and it's just the same thing on the opposite end when you're buying. So on the buying, you're always scaling out into resistance. You're going to scale out into support. So remember earlier, team, we were talking about the crack here, the trend line crack, which we'll get into my lesson tomorrow. And look at this beautiful trend line crack. Yeah, terrible singing, I know. But you crack this trend line. And now what was I telling Kay and Blackberry? Now, where am I really looking for an entry? entry because I know what? It's going to have a little bit of support below from this little shelf wedge area, right? Not shelf, wedge, I should say, but this little shelf area built at 11.15, 11.20. So wait for that to crack. And my entry is what? I said 11.10 if you want to be a little bit on the higher side. 11.07, I would have been, me on the safer side. Because, as soon as you crack that, whammy, you're good. And so as soon as you crack that area, your first scale out zone is what? Find your next support area where you would if you were looking for a bounce, right, team? If you're looking for you're wanting to go long, which I know most of us do that, that's where you would scale out. So when you go, I know it's hard for us to think the opposite because there's so many buyers in the team. So same point being for the buyers, I know it's my point being because there's no short. When you short a lot, it'll help you scale out for your buying. Is my point. So when you're buying on those dips and you're scaling out into where people are maybe looking to short because you're hitting resistance. So same thing when you're shorting, look to scale out in areas where people are looking to find bounces. Make sense, team? Hope it does. Because like I said, you crack this first little area 11.15, you're golden for what? It's going to bounce maybe at 11, but most likely at this little lower shadow, or these meet these lower shadows, and it comes right down to 11.67. You get a 40 cent plus bounce from the trend line crack, and essentially, not essentially the trend line crack, but because you want this to crack, that surefire 11.15, 11.20 area. So that's what I'm saying. So on the short, you're selling, or should say, you're selling or buying, I should say, I guess buying back your shares into support. So boom, that would have been your first scale out area. Then you're waiting for that area to crack, and then you're wanting this area to crack because you see this little support, as some support about 10.50, 10.55, and then now you have some right here at this old upper shadow. Look how we're hitting this again. Beautiful. So as you can see, this would be another scale out zone, and then your last scale out zone, if you're somehow still in, would be this $10 VWAP area. So the same thing. You're just scaling out into either resistance on the way up if you're buying and you're going long, or if you're shorting, you're scaling out into support on the way down.